Hi, everyone. My name is Nick. Welcome back to the podcast. I appreciate you tuning in. Now, today we're going to be talking about EM screens or GM screens, whichever one you want to call them. There's been a lot of discourse around are they even needed anymore? So that's what we're going to talk about. Should you even use a GM or DM screen? I'm going to be honest with you. This is the TLDR, too long didn't read. The answer is maybe. It's maybe. It really just depends on your table, your campaign, your game. Just do whatever is best for your table. That's all I'm going to say. But I do appreciate you listening. Please, if you can, share this with a friend. That really helps the channel grow a lot. But let's get started. So, where did this whole DM screen thing even start? Well, to the best of my research that I could find, a game called Judge's Guild in 1977 first produced something they called a judge's shield. And that's really the first time that a screen of some sort was produced by a game company. And then in 1979, both AD&D and then Traveler came out with their own versions of the product, calling them screens. AD&D called them the DM screen, and then Traveler called it a referee screen. So that's where the roots of a whole screen takes place. 1977, Judge's Shield. 1979 is the first time we see screen. So I wasn't around back then, but apparently before 1977, a lot of GM, DMs, referees would just use whatever they could to make a screen to separate and hide their tools and everything like that. They would use binders or manila folders, anything like that, books where they could just set up to block their screen. So that's the start of it. But why were GM screens even a thing? What was the point of them? As you probably know, it hides you as the GM. It hides everything you have back there. So your dice rolls are hidden. Any kind of chart or paper. So a lot of old school OSR guys, they have like roll tables and roll to hit charts, stuff like that. That's all hidden. Any kind of secret information that you need to be able to reference that you don't want your players seeing, your screen hides all that. You also can hide your minifigs. So if you have figures for, a crazy mech monster or a crazy dragon that you're going to slam onto the table to surprise your players, that's all hidden. They'll never be able to see that behind the screen. And then the final thing is this is more like way, way, way old school, but it would set a boundary between the GM and the players. The GM was the world and the players resided in it. So it kind of helped differentiate that. So that was really what the purpose of the screens were for. But we're seeing more and more GMs kind of move away from using screens at all. And why is that? Well, we know TTRPGs are ever changing. They're constantly being innovated and improved upon. And from what the original TTRPGs looked like back in the early 70s to the games we have now, it's almost a night and day difference. Some you might not even recognize the games that were back then or the games that are now, depending on when you started the hobby. What's interesting is how much the GM screens themselves have changed. So this is a story that I found. It's quoted to Mike Mornard. I hope I said his name right. Apparently, he was one of the first earliest players in Gary Gygax's campaigns. So he has a story that's accredited to him that Gary Gygax sometimes would completely hide behind a full body screen. So you couldn't see him at all, and all you would hear was like his disembodied voice. So there was no human person to act as the GM or the DM, and you just reacted to the world. So it's gone from apparently that, where it was a full body, you couldn't see the GM, DM in any way, shape, or form, to the much smaller, the more famous classic 4-panel plastic piece or the 3-panel wood piece. And that's been used for a long, long time. And then now we're getting to the no GM screen. So the thing about those, 4-panel plastic pieces or the 3-panel wood ones, they worked phenomenally well for their time period, and they also work phenomenally well for OSR games. It's perfect for those dungeon crawling sandbox campaigns. When you need to hide minis, you need to hide the flushed out map, you need to hide your tables, that is when you want a GM screen. It also really helps emphasize that the GM is that referee, that he's there to be the world and you are there to move the world along. But as the hobby has changed and it's grown and it's been innovated upon and improved, we've noticed that systems, different game systems, they really started to give players a lot more narrative control. And I'm not saying that OSR, the players don't have narrative control. They push the campaign with their decisions, but I'm more talking about like the norm of TTRPGs is now becoming more narrative sandbox, where players have a place to have narrative control and they can help build on the lore and build the world instead of just navigating through it. See, that narrative sandbox is becoming more of the norm. If that's the game that you and your table want to run or are currently running, pulling down the screen, the GM screen, it really does have its advantages. Let's talk about two of them. So, for starters, you are quite literally removing a barrier from the table, and it shows everyone there that you are on equal footing. It shows that even though the GM is the one who runs the game and is the ultimate voice of the world, you are willing to sit, listen, and accept player suggestions and ideas. See, with the whole narrative sandbox, GMing isn't a referee the same way it is in OSR. So removing that barrier helps, whether they realize it or not, it helps the players feel more open to share their ideas. The other thing it really helps with is players trusting the GM. So no player is perfect. I know every GM listening said, duh, we all know that. But if it's a player listening, sorry to burst out, blah, 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 but no player is perfect. Everyone has something they need to work on. It could be because of some bad past GM experiences that really left you with TTRPG trauma. But some players, they do feel a certain type of way about GMs who hide their roles behind the screen. It can really push that GM versus player narrative. When you roll out in the open, when there's no screen to hide that, it does help put their insecurities at ease. And it really shows that the GM is there to support the players and give them a phenomenal story rather than just try to hurt them for the sake of the game. It really helps with that. The GM supports the players and the player supports the GM idea that we see more in modern day TTRPGs. So if you do want to go ahead and try and play without a GM screen, well, how do you go about it? Well, me personally, when I set up, all I have is my laptop, my journal, and then my dice tray. So my laptop, I have that open to whatever website, Google Doc. I have all these different tabs for, well, basically for any kind of rules that I don't want to forget or I have a tendency to forget, potential plot points that could pop up depending on the player's actions, and then any additional information that I may want. What's interesting, kind of when I was reading through Reddit and when I was watching some other videos on people's opinions on screen versus no screen, I've seen the idea that some people tend to believe that a laptop isn't really different than having a screen, but that's something I pretty strongly disagree with because, I mean, if you think about it, tons of players use laptops or they use iPads or tablets, and that's not seen as them having a screen. So I don't understand why if a GM uses one, it's the one and the same. Doesn't really make sense to me. So that's what I do with my laptop. I can also run all kind of music off of it, and it's just everything there is just a click away. Then I have my leather journal, which is where I have any last minute preps or ideas that I write down. And it's also where I keep my session notes for that current session. And then finally, I just have my dice tray, which even though it's not in the middle of the table for everyone to see, if anyone wants to look over when I make a roll, they can do so. But the crazy thing is, what I've noticed with my players since I've dropped the GM screen is that they don't really care about my rolls. They very rarely look over to see if I am telling the truth with what I rolled. So if that's something that you're worried about, most players don't really care to check your dice. As long as you show them that you're trustworthy, they're going to believe you. Similarly, with your own players, if you trust your players, you don't ever ask to see the dice they rolled. It's when you've proven that you're not trustworthy is when the GM wants to see the dice, right? Same thing. So if you show yourself trustworthy, your players aren't going to care about what you roll. Now, that being said, I'm not super big on hard and fast rules saying you need to do this or you don't need to do that. What I like to do is I'm more about challenging my playstyle and trying to grow as a GM, which is originally why I stopped using a GM screen. I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could do it, to see if I could learn anything. And I'll be honest, I fell in love with it. I will probably never go back to a GM screen unless I start to run a certain type of campaign that encourages it, like OSR. So, what I hope for with this episode is that anyone who listens to it comes away with a simple idea, and that is to challenge yourself as a GM. If you are pro GM, DM screen, try taking 1 or 2 sessions or running a mini campaign or running a one shot where you don't use it. Challenge yourself and see what you can learn about yourself as a GM by not having that screen. Who knows, you may actually like it and keep not using one. And then on the flip, if you're a GM who, like me, loves not playing with one, or you've never played with one, depending on where you came in at in this hobby, challenge yourself and try one. Try to use a GM screen and figure out how you can use the GM screen to your benefit to help and make an even better game for your players. Yeah, so challenge yourself. That's all I want to say. Now, sound off in the comments. What do you think? Should GM screens even be a thing anymore? Are they still relevant in this hobby or are they completely dying out? Do you use one? Do you not use one? Why or why not? Let me know. Looking forward to all the comments. And as always, I will see you in the next one.